Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. My name is Mike Millian. I'm the president of the Private Motor Truck Council of Canada, and this is one of our series of monthly webinars that we've been doing on a semi-regular basis since COVID began in March of 2020. Today's topic is obviously of great interest to everyone. We have over 200 people registered for today's event. We have 82 online right now. Just so you are aware, the presentation is being recorded. Everyone who registered for today's webinar will get a recording of the presentation at the conclusion of the webinar. Just to go over a few ground rules for everybody, only people that are co-hosts have the ability to unmute themselves and turn the camera on. The rest of you that have joined us here today, there will be 10 minutes of Q&A at the end of the presentation. If you want to put your questions in the chat window, we will ask those questions to the panelists at the end of today's presentation. Of course, I want to thank our sponsors, Trucking Human Resources Sector Council Atlantic and Peterbilt, who through their generous sponsorship here today have made this seminar free for everybody to attend. Just before we get into today's presentation, I do have a sponsor video from Peterbilt. Trucking Human Resource Sector Council Atlantic did not send a video along, but again, we thank both of these companies for their support of this webinar and for making today's webinar free for your attendance. I'm going to turn my camera off and mute myself. I'm going to play this brief message from Peterbilt, and then we'll be right back. Again, thanks to Peterbilt for that message. Sorry for the delay getting back on. I'd say we were having technical difficulties, but the technical difficulties were me. So it really wasn't a technical difficulty. I was having an issue getting the slide forward. Again, thanks to Trucking, Human Resource Sector Council Atlantic, and Peterbilt for their sponsorship of today's seminar, which obviously we have great interest in. As I said, over 200 people registered. We currently have 105 online. So we're going to get right into this great moderator and group of panelists that we have here to entertain you today. Your moderator for today's session is Teresa Cook. Teresa leads sales for the smart infrastructure business of Siemens in Canada and the country level business development function with a special focus on Siemens electrical vehicle charging infrastructure business. Her 15-year Siemens career started in management, consulting in the US and Germany, led her to offshore wind in Denmark, and then back to Canada for strategy roles across Siemens energy-focused business. She holds a degree in systems design engineering from the University of Waterloo in Canada and a doctorate in neuroscience from the Max Planck Institute for Biological Cybernetics in Tübingen, Germany. Really challenging my vocabulary here. Teresa sits on the boards of QTRIC and Electric Mobility Canada. Teresa is married with 3 young children and is a certified professional coach, yoga teacher, and musician with 4 original tracks on SoundCloud. Teresa, welcome. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Mike. I sent you a shortened version, but oh well.
I have not seen that yet. I guess I should have checked my email. It's all right.
Okay.
I think it was good. I'm looking forward to the program. So take it over.
Thank you so much for hosting us. And I'm just so grateful that we got this opportunity to connect and create this amazing panel this morning. Even that video was just so inspiring. And that's the journey I think that we're all on together. And it is a steep climb, right? I thought that video was dead on. It's a steep climb and there's a lot of turns in the road. And so I think today we're taking stock of where we are on that mountainous climb together and what are the peaks and valleys ahead of us right now. I was also having a tough debate this morning with Mike Roth of NACFE of what was harder, getting 3 children to school in the rain or truck electrification. He said it was truck electrification. So I think the jury's still out on that, but well, we can debate that one this morning. So I wanted to just quickly introduce our panel, which is just a superstar panel, and then we will hear from each of them. And Hanfo, maybe you can slowly start bringing them on so that we can see all their lovely faces. And then we'll get into a moderated discussion with all of us together. So first off, Shana Rector-Bleeker, she's the co-founder of 7Gen, which is a Vancouver-based company that's really bringing together the financing aspects and the know-how for medium and heavy duty fleet electrification, both on the vehicle side and the charging side together in one package. Then we have Aaron Ritter. Aaron joins us from Walmart. He's the Director of Transportation Strategy at Walmart Canada. And he is leading the deployment of one of Canada's largest electric truck orders, 130 Tesla semis. And their goal is to get to 100% alternative powered fleet by 2028. Then I'd like to welcome Charlotte Argue from Geotab. Charlotte is a Senior Manager of Fleet Electrification at Geotab. And she's really a pioneer in this field. She's been working in this since 2009. I was born before then, but I was going to say, were we born before then? But yeah, we're too old now. But it was amazing. So her focus is using data from the telematics to inform fleet electrification strategies. And she's also the BC chapter chair for Women in EVs. And then Mike Roth. Mike comes to us from NACFE. So he's the executive director at NACFE, the North American Council for Freight Efficiency, and a principal at the world-leading think tank, RMI. He's worked in commercial vehicles, also a major pioneer for over 35 years, and his specialty is scaling green technology for trucking. So just an amazing panel this morning, so excited. And we're bringing really together the experts in data, in finance, in commercial vehicles, and electrical infrastructure to see how we can solve the challenges before us today. So for about the next 35 minutes, we're going to be doing a moderated discussion, and hopefully we'll learn a lot. So we're going to kick off with Aaron. So Aaron, Walmart Canada has been making really exciting progress in electric trucking with that big order you made and very ambitious targets. Can you walk us through your journey so far?
Yeah, of course. Good morning, everybody. A quick thanks to PMTC for allowing me to share some of the journey, obviously along with the sponsors and Teresa for co-hosting. I will say it has not been a quick path to get us to select electrification. We spent several years of completing due diligence on all the potential alternative fuel offerings out in the market that have been bubbling up. Hydrogen, hybrid, propane, biodiesels, LNG. And really, it came down to how the best solution is going to fit into the way that our specific fleet operates. So the selection of choosing electric tied into our publicly stated aspirations to be fully converted to alternative fuel by 2028. And there was a number of factors that led us to choose electric. Canada's availability of clean power generation was right near the top for us. We are very driven by hydro nuclear power. That just enforces our commitment to sustainability. Carbon tax, I'm going to say avoidance. There are some very strong escalations happening in Canada right now as a deterrent to continuing on diesel. And certainly there's an expense that comes with that. I'm going to say, I'll also say within the last month or two, escalating fuel rates. As we see the fluctuations and fuel continue to rise, it really makes our path to electric seem like the right choice more and more every day. Driver and safety enhancements, huge from a technological standpoint, vehicle weight balance from the chassis, from having batteries in them. Another huge point, the noise reduction that comes with shifting away from ICE vehicles. And I will say our fleet is domiciled at 3 main campuses across Canada. This really allows us to proceed with in-house charging as an option and really try to lead the Canadian market for change, because we do not rely on on-road infrastructure. And just on that note, quick fact, about 75% of all of our routes out of Walmart Canada are less than 400 kilometers per shift, which really fits in well with the published mileage of electrical.
Thanks, Aaron. Those are some great drivers that you're sharing with us for why this journey is so important for you. Mike, with your expertise at NACFE and all the work you've done, especially your run on less demonstration, which, by the way, just if anyone hasn't checked it out, there's just some amazing videos, like the driver interviews, just at all the webinars. You know, you can just basically capture like years of work in these nutshells on whatever topic you'd like. So I highly recommend checking it out. We can put the link in the chat. So yeah, you've collected so much data and also just direct experience. So based on these results, what are you really seeing as the segments and the use cases? You know, Aaron talked about 400 kilometers or less. What is most suitable for going electric first? And when is it like, you know what, electric, like, let's just not do that right now?
Yeah, so thanks, Charlotte or Teresa. This is an interesting time because you know, if you just read the magazine articles and everything, you think that the electric truck transformation is well on its way, and we're really at the early stages. So there aren't that many electric trucks out there. And when we were looking at Run on Less, this is our 3rd one. And Run on Less is all about demonstrating what's happening in the real world, the best of the best. And so I was a little reluctant to study and to have a run on electric trucks, but we did it in the fall because we found 13 electric trucks from 13 different manufacturers across the U.S. and Canada that we had in the run. We had a Day and Ross truck in Montreal, a Purolator truck in Vancouver, as well as a bunch of trucks across the U.S. And these were smaller trucks. We had a small in Manhattan, a 43 kilowatt hour van. I mean, that's a smaller battery pack than is in Teslas. And because they just don't drive very long distances in Manhattan. And then we had, you know, almost 450 kilowatt hours in some of the heavy tractors. And so what we concluded, and thanks for the advice. We have 31 videos that we published in 60 days for Run on Less, and it approaches all kinds of interesting information. And then we've got a lot of data on the site where you can peer into each of the 13 trucks over the 18 days and understand how they were operated. I would say that these trucks are really early on. So some of them are prototypes, early production, but it gives us a lot of good insight. So it's good. Some of what I'm going to say is really simple, and that is it's easier to deploy electric trucks, and it will happen faster in less miles, smaller battery packs, smaller trucks, and we will scale into the larger ones as we move forward. All the way up into we'll see how far electric trucks can go. I mean, literally, whether it's 300, 400, 500 miles or more as they start to become available. But smaller trucks first, vans, step vans, medium duty box trucks. Heavy duty terminal tractors in yards are an excellent place to start electrification before you go into day cabs and onward. So why we believe that this is happening is, one, because the trucks can do the job, and the total cost of ownership is starting to become, not completely acceptable, but in line with where these early adopters think they'll need to be. But what we found is that there's all of these less obvious benefits to electric trucks that can be monetized, and it's huge. I mean, Aaron talked about sound and noise. If that helps us attract drivers to these trucks in such a difficult time for attracting and retaining drivers, that's worth money to the fleets. And so I believe this is a really a big driver attraction. But there's a lot of other costs that come out of the operation. The big climb, as Teresa, you said, is the infrastructure, knowing exactly what truck and the availability of trucks. There's a number of challenges, but that's how we view the market segment adoption occurring.
Yeah, Mike, that's super interesting. And thanks for bringing up the point of electrical infrastructure, which is obviously a challenge we're seeing every day. And particularly, just following on to this, like one of my concerns is just that the electrical infrastructure, we have all these thoughts of, we know what our limits are. We know, like, okay, if your panel's here, it's going to cost so much money to run your cable over here, or you literally don't have the space. So you have to upgrade the whole wiring, right, of this depot or whatever. And we know we have assumptions about where do the chargers have to be and stuff like that. And meanwhile, operations has also a very specific set of unsaid assumptions, which in their mind is like, that is going to be how it runs. And I worry that the worlds are not colliding quickly enough.
Well, I think, like a lot of things in life, this is about crawling and then walking and then running. And, we want to have in our mind, I mean, I'm not sure a toddler thinks about running, but we want to have in our mind what the end game is, right? So for Aaron, at each of those 3 locations, all of them being as many electric, maybe some other alternative fuels, but how does all that fit? But we don't have to figure that all out at the beginning. I mean, learn from 1 truck, 2 truck, 10 trucks, learn from that. Change your plans, modify them, where the trucks are charging, how fast charging do we need, what are the parking spots, how many chargers per truck, all of that we will learn over the early deployments, and then being able to move into the other phases. So, I always tell people to get started, study first, test, do your run on your total cost of ownership calculations, buy a few, get some charging infrastructure in place, always engage your utility really quick, but start that process. But don't feel like you got to have it all figured out as you're starting.
Yeah, we need to be like, it has to be an agile approach, right? Start, learn, redo, right? But get your single line diagram. Okay, Charlotte, moving to the data world. Geotab has just so much data. I've talked to people, they're like, yeah, I'm Geotab. Oh yeah, you? Oh yeah, I'm Geotab, right? So you've got tons of, little devices out in the world collecting data, 2 million plus devices I read on your website. So what insights can you share from all of this that helps us make smarter decisions when it comes to truck electrification?
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. Definitely one of the challenges with fleet electrification today is that because it's relatively new technology, there are still a lot of unknowns. So what we're doing is we're leveraging data in several different ways to remove some of the, I would say, uncertainty around electrification and really bring more confidence to fleet operators. So one way we're doing this is we've been pulling off data from EVs since the first generation of vehicles started hitting the roads. So we've been able to analyze thousands of vehicles and literally millions and millions of trips to see how they perform in the real world. And some of the questions that, of course, come up with EVs are related to the battery, related to the range, battery health. So on the range side, what we've been able to do is look at actual trip data for different makes and models to see how factors like temperature and speed impact real world range. Everyone's probably heard of the guessometer of, range predictor of these EVs. Well, we're starting to take out, that guess part and provide, here are some reasons that your range might be different in the middle of winter compared to the middle of summer. And this information then can be used in our modeling for a fleet's daily driving conditions to determine which EVs would be range capable to do the job in all of the driving conditions that that particular fleet and that particular vehicle are working under. So we can look at, telematics history of the ICE vehicles, look at their trips, their daily distances, the seasonality, and then in the model use real world EV data to say, okay, if this was this particular EV, would it do the job? Would you have to rely on daytime charging, or could you do overnight charging only? What battery size, if you're starting to look at speccing, would you actually need? So that's helping provide confidence and providing, ground truthing into the industry. And the other big one is, battery life. So, okay, these batteries are really expensive. I'm going to pay a lot of money for this new technology, this new vehicle. Is my battery going to die in 5 years? So overall, to date, like we've seen with lithium ion batteries, that the health has lasted pretty well. Only an average degradation rate of a little over 2% per year, which is quite good. But what we're also looking at is under what conditions do we see higher rates of degradation? And again, this is based on real situations, real vehicles on the road. So one thing we've found a correlation with is if you're, say, relying solely on DC fast charging and you're in a very hot climate, that combination is actually bad for the battery, and you do see higher rates of degradation. So this combination is important for fleets to know. But for a lot, it's interesting, for a lot of operations, everyone thinks of, tracking and long haul and, you're really high utilization, but the reality is a lot of daily routes are well within the EV range today. So in many situations, even some degradation shouldn't be too concerning because it's not actually impacting your daily needs. But then for the high demand routes, this is information that a fleet manager should take into account, thinking about, okay, well, 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, these vehicles are expected to last longer than ICE vehicles. So 10 years down the line, even, what does this mean if my batteries degrade at this rate, and what are some things that I should think about when I'm sizing my vehicle today? So yeah, it's really about taking out the guesswork and supporting data-driven decision-making. And as Mike said this well, but for the trucks, like a lot of the data we have is on the lighter duty side, and some of that can be applied over to trucking industry, and some of the assumptions that we have been able to kind of dispel, or myths that we've been able to dispel, but it's so important to get ground truth. So this is why programs like NAC fees run on less are so important.
Yeah, Charlotte, thanks so much. And agreed. I've heard a couple of people, I think I noticed Aaron saying it too, like what the data sheet says, question mark, right? And where was that data sheet produced? And was there Canadian winter in that data sheet, or, right? And then do I need that onboard heater, right? For my cab, or because sometimes that diesel file fuel heater, even though it's not a big GHG contributor, it might really help the performance of the vehicle under certain conditions. And the other thing is, like, for the charging infrastructure side, we need to know the reality of what's going to happen, because we're sizing the infrastructure based on these assumptions. And if that efficiency factor is wrong, we might be sizing the wrong amount of charging of physical wires, right?
Exactly. So if you know
important.
the actual efficiency and you know the daily driving cycle, that can inform the charging strategy as well, which is another area that we're working on with our.
So how can people get the truth, like, from you? How can people get that? Like, how can people get data from you guys?
So if they're Geotab customers, the data is already there. So it's essentially like what we're doing is we've embedded some of that knowledge into our software. So we have right now it's for light duty vehicles, but we have a suitability assessment that you can run a report, an automatic simulation essentially, looking at your existing vehicles with the telematics, and then it identifies, total cost of ownership and range capability of the different EVs available in your market. And it considers those external factors like temperature to ensure that, we're not saying, yeah, you can go electric and not be concerned. We're being conservative, and we're saying in all seasons that you operate in, this is what's capable. But we do make some of this information. We're an open platform. We make, and we also share some of this information. So we have a public tool on battery degradation and temperature and range. So we make this information available to the industry at large.
Great. I'm sure that lots of people are interested in that. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Charlotte. So Mike, just coming back to you and maybe just kind of briefly in a nutshell, just because Run on Less was such an amazing pioneering exercise, was there anything specific for Canada, like 2 or 3 nuggets that you just want to make sure we do here in this forum?
Well, we executed it in September, so it was pretty moderate temperature, but a number of trucks we're continuing to follow in Canada through this winter, the trucks that were in Run on Less in particular, as well as a few others. So we're going to keep watching and working with folks like Charlotte and others on understanding cold weather. That's kind of the first thing that people always attribute to operating these electric trucks in Canada. But I think the other thing is these duty cycles. So the Canadian infrastructure of highways might actually be suitable for this electric truck deployment. I mean, we're talking about fewer corridors that maybe we can utilize a quicker advancement of public charging, or to Aaron's point, maybe shorter distances than what's typically heard of in maybe in the United States for some of these trucks. Maybe more dedicated routes, because that's the one thing that's really critical here is return to base. Because these charging will be depot based first. They'll fleets will put charging at the depots. Aaron talked about it, and then they'll look at opportunity charging in different places during the day where they might be able to help get a quick top off. Or there's even business models out there of where trucks are traded from one driver to another during his or her hours of service. So I think it's very interesting that we're having this webinar and we're continuing to think about regions for electric truck deployment, because I get surprised all the time. I've been at this a long time. I get surprised all the time about where and what. One quick example, and then I'll turn it over, is on beverage. Very heavy loads, but beverage is very short duty cycles. They spend a lot of time overnight. And so even though beverage is heavy and you think, well, maybe not for electric trucks, but their duty cycle and the times they're driving, the miles they drive is perfect. So people like Anheuser-Busch, Coke and Pepsi and so forth are really looking to scale these electric trucks quickly because of the nature of their duty cycles.
Thanks for that insight, Mike. And we're curious, maybe we should redo this webinar after you get your winter results back. Okay, Shayna, so yeah, at 7Gen, you guys are electrifying a lot of different kinds of fleets, from last mile to waste collection, container terminals. So what elements are kind of always on that critical path? And sort of what are those pinch points that we really need to be honing in on?
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Teresa. And it's great to see everyone here today. Couple things. I think just in the top, Mike's already said, like, there's an effort to just get started. Don't get tripped up by these pinch points. So the second one you said, Teresa, is just stepping into this with an ethos to be agile. So we need a plan, and we also need to learn from the plan and adjust. I'd say there's 6 main steps. There's, of course, this big feasibility phase, and Aaron mentioned, a year of planning which fuel, which technology. The big pinch points there, I'd say it's risk tolerance, it's new technology, which one are we willing to place bets on? Of course, price. And another big one is, frankly, capacity, capability, familiarity to even assess the information you are reviewing. So this is where you start to not plan for fleet replacement necessarily in traditional ways with the same people around the table. This is tapping the expertise of folks on this call today, and that just looks and feels different. Step 2, of course, detailed design and actual like financing plan. Big things I see trip up there are access to utility, timing, availability. That's often, you can rush a lot of the other elements, but they've got a lot of demands on them right now, especially in Canada, where we do have this clean grid. There's so many net zero commitments being made. So just allowing for that time to engage appropriately to get power to site. Another big one, timing windows for government incentive applications. You can have the perfect plan and then, oh wait, the funding window isn't open for another 6 months or a year. Other ones there. Third one is, of course, procurement. I mean, you're not even going to get these vehicles unless you place that PO. So getting through those first 2 phases to a sufficient level of confidence to at least express to the technology providers, we want to put down a deposit. You may need to change, adjust battery size, etc., but get in line, because we know supply chains are real crunch in every segment. The other big one with that, now that there's more companies coming to the table, I mean, Walmart, great leadership, there's big orders being placed. And if you're doing onesies, twosies, tensies of vehicles and somebody else comes in with a 500 order, well, guess where you're going to be in line. So, that's a big pinch point with procurement. Installation, while technically complicated, one of the easier steps once you've done all this planning, that can get some flow. And I must say, it's a really exciting time. I mean, I've been at some sites where charging infrastructure is getting installed. We know the vehicles are coming. That really feels like a turning point. I've even had fleet managers go, this is big. This is like when my great grandfather was going, we're going from horse and buggy to there's this thing called a gas station. Like for some, it feels, and it is like it's this different. So that's an exciting moment with less pinch. 5th, operate. The big pinch point, patience. Everyone's waited a long time, planned it really hard. They want these things to work perfectly from day one. They've committed to externals. We're going to have zero emission transportation. And guess what? Interoperability challenges. So, don't plan the big press release and everything's going to be perfect week 1. And the last one is this optimization phase. And that's the working with the data that Charlotte was talking about. How does this work in your operations with your loads? Don't just take the spec sheet like we've already said. Just big pinches.
Those are awesome, Shayna. Yeah, I mean, it is like it's a generational change. I mean, even now when I go to, unfortunately, tank my own car, which is still diesel, I always think, wow, maybe my children will think I'm so, old for doing something like this, So I don't know. We're on this changing point, right? And patience, couldn't agree more, because we think we're just there, and then it's like, no, we're not. Right. And then the get in line, I agree, like get in line with the utility, right? ASAP. Get in line with the government, ASAP. Get in line with all the supply chains, ASAP, right? And the thing is, you have to have someone who understands how to apply for government funding, right? How to do so. The type of multidisciplinary knowledge that we need in order to actually pull this off, it's intense, right? I think we're all going to school, right? We're all learning like IT, OT, cybersecurity, procurement, fleet operations, like electrical grid. It's like, it's cool, but it's a big growth mindset.
And my last point on that is, don't wait too late to engage your wider team. And I mean, Aaron may have comments on this, but I'll be working with head of sustainability or head of fleets, and we'll feel we've gone really far down the plan. And if finance isn't following your journey and understanding your fleet replacement plan and how you pay for that is going to need to shift, they could put the brakes on it. Or real estate, wait, you got to like dredge and put in installation and you've never engaged me. So don't forget, you don't have to wait for the plan to be perfect. Get the folks at the table, navigate change together.
Exactly. I'm always like big about, the big workshop, right? And we can workshop virtually, it's okay, but we really have to get everybody's head in the game, right? And getting a sense of like a large buy-in from a large group of stakeholders. Yeah. Thanks. So Aaron, coming back to like the reality of the business case, right? You've got to convince the stakeholders that this is going to work, and everyone's got their own agenda. We know what it's like. It's like herding cats inside any corporation, right? So how do you prepare a successful internal business case How do you get that buy-in?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, Shayna hit on it. It's very cross-functional. I personally have to secure the money before we do anything. So from a business case standpoint, a lot of it is theory and we're rushing to practical. So Mike kind of hit upon this too now. We're not going to slow progress up. We've got the theory, we need to put it into practice, live and learn with the new product that is coming our way. I will say a few of the obstacles that we are incurring, definitely not showstoppers, but things to keep our eyes on. Current supply chain, kind of a continuance of, I'll call it COVID plus, because that really threw everything off, and not specific to electric transformation. I mean, if anyone's tried to get anything right now, supply and demand is a big issue. So we've had personal struggles from a transformer delivery standpoint, electrical components, high voltage cabling. We're actually moving a little bit closer to the practical. We're bringing a site down next week. It'll be running on a 1.1 million square foot site that will be running on generators just so we can get the infrastructure in place for our electrical transformation. So it's exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time. I will hit on the mindset of contracting as well. It's a whole different contract, a mindset versus the typical ICE agreements. Maintenance per mile discussion. This is new technology. We need, a fresh set of eyes on all of our contracts. So that's not something that's necessarily cookie cutter. We can't use what we've always used for the last 20 years. We really need to dig in and make sure that that risk is shared. And the final potential point, and this is way down the road, but I do want everyone to keep eyes on this one. As it gains traction, as it gains scope, as all the corporations, passenger vehicles begin shifting to electric, we need our utilities and providers ahead of the game. Not to say they don't move quickly, kind of tongue in cheek there, but with this groundswell on conversions, we're going to need some definite infrastructure investment so that it doesn't blunt the momentum that we have.
Yeah, Aaron, I couldn't agree more. So Shayna and Charlotte and I, and a couple of, I'm probably forgetting people, but we're on this medium and heavy duty working group for Electric Mobility Canada. And that's exactly one of the points that we've identified. And there's another working group, the utility providers group, identifying the kind of the same thing. And like, if we step back, we can calculate what the load's going to be. Of course, it's going to be the peak load per location that's really going to be, what's going to hit. But utilities, we need the utilities at the table. Now they're regulated, so they can't there's a bit of it's not like California just telling them like, guys, get it done, right? So it's a challenge. I was in another call recently where someone was saying, utilities, like, because they're not for profit, if it's a for-profit company, they'd be like, whoop, whoop, I got so much revenue coming my way, let me build it, right? But now it's maybe we're lacking some of those mechanisms. How can we get, this on the table? We might have to go a different route. So we're we need to get the visibility on the gaps so that this stuff can get built, because you're right. Otherwise, a transformer can take like a year to build and deliver, and then 2 years to put that medium voltage substation in place so that you can get your power. And what are you going to do? Run diesel backup generators to make your clean transportation, right? Anyways, okay, agreed. So then moving along to Mike, driver experience. So exciting. Can you tell us what was their reaction?
Drivers love electric trucks. And when I say that, people go, yeah, tell me something I don't already know, Mike. But I want to say that, because we all, maybe many of you and some of you on watching own an electric car, or have driven in one, or ride one, or have a friend who has one. Everyone seems to love the driving experience. But, I took a very hard, I entered this whole discussion around driving electric versus diesel with a very, show me mindset. And all 13 of these drivers, NACFE went out and visited all of these. Shayna actually helped us at one of the sites in British Columbia, but we went out to experience what it was like to drive these trucks, fleet, how they were operating them. We met with the truck OEMs and so forth. And the drivers really love them. And we've got a number of videos and discussions. And what I think is going to happen here whether it's noise, whether it's the fact that there's such a smooth ride, and they love the single pedal with regenerative braking. I mean, it took me a while to understand what they meant by that, but basically, with that regenerative braking, you can avoid some braking. And so drivers feel less stressed at the end of the day. And so I have concluded myself, and I think the industry is starting to get it, that this will be a huge driver attraction and retention situation. And it comes from all different kinds. They feel safer, they're less tired at the end of the day, and on and on. So, it blew me away, and we'll see how it comes as we move forward. But I'm pretty convinced. Now, it'll take time. Automated manual transmissions. Drivers hated them at the beginning. Now, no one would want, or very few would prefer to continue shifting. So it'll take some time, but it's a big deal.
It's so exciting and great to hear, Mike. So Charlotte, now switching gears, this is not just about a fuel change, but it's also a huge digital wave. And we need digital systems to actually bring down the costs. Because if we just kind of do it all just, manual, we could get huge peaks and therefore, again, run into these electrical infrastructure issues. So how can we optimize using digital, like a digital layer?
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, even outside of EVs, fleets are becoming more digital and more connected. So I wouldn't say necessarily that this trend is exclusive to EVs, but there's certainly even more benefit or value for going connected with EV. But yeah, just looking at the last decade or even last 5 years with telematics and digital systems, they've been used more and more by fleets to better manage their fleet, better optimize their fleet. And this goes much beyond like asset tracking or what used to be just GPS. It's about benchmarking, it's real-time notifications, and preventative maintenance being driven by machine learning. So yeah, these technologies are making fleets safer, and they're making them less costly and more efficient. The whole thing, you can't manage what you don't measure. What's unique about electric vehicles, where there's this even stronger case for having connected systems, is when you introduce the charging piece of the equation. So just starting with a very simple example, let's say a driver forgets to plug in at the end of their shift, which has been known to happen. And if the vehicles are connected to a management platform, the system can see, okay, this vehicle has a certain battery level that's lower than it should be. I know that the vehicle is in the fleet yard and not charging. So now a notification can be sent out to the driver or to the operation manager and say, hey, this vehicle's not going to be charged in the morning. Go plug it in. So this is, a simple way to avoid a situation where someone comes back to the fleet yard in the morning for their shift and finds a battery that's half empty, and have to do a last minute change of vehicles. So just a simple thing like that can avoid, downtime and higher costs for the company. But getting a bit more complex, let's say your fleet yard, or imagine your depot with 10 or 20 or even more trucks all coming in at the end of the day and plugging in. This, of course, is going to be a huge strain on the building's electrical capacity and on the grid. But that can be reduced with load management or by sharing power across the vehicles over the course, say, of the night, if they're all plugged in overnight. So there's a whole, well, this very well, but there's a whole industry that's emerged around charge management and charging software and building energy management systems to help mitigate this. But for it to be a truly smart system, it needs to have sight, or needs to know what's happening on the vehicle side as well. So let's say one of the vehicles, you have your bank of 10 vehicles plugged in at the same time, but one of the vehicles actually has its next route scheduled in the next hour. So for that system to know where to prioritize that power, maybe the other vehicles are done for the day, then the system being connected to the vehicles and the fleet management system can then prioritize that power, make sure that that vehicle A is charged first. And that way, yeah, it supports dispatching, it supports routing, and it's really makes it a lot easier, but also a lot more optimized for a fleet operator to manage their vehicles.
Exactly, because those vehicles have got to get out, right? So you've got to know that, okay, how am I going to make this happen now under this real-time situation that I have? And I think the other constraint that comes in is if you're parking very tight, right? And in some cases, you're retrofitting garages or situations where you do have very tight parking and you have a first in, first out or a last in, first out constraint, then it's really serious, because otherwise you can get really like jammed in there. Of course, if you can create space where vehicles can kind of get around each other, that's really helpful, because otherwise you've got a whole like pairing situation as well in terms of where are these vehicles actually and when do they have to get out and in what order. Yeah, lots of dimensions to optimize. All right, Shayna, we need money. How do we get the money?
Yeah, well, lots of parts to this pie, so there's not one answer for everyone here. What I would preface with saying is, I think we've already covered it, right? There's new actors coming together around solving for this transition. So with that, there's different people that can be involved in paying for this. So as I said, I mean, government incentives are helping in these early days. Don't be planning your business case and deploying 2025, 2026 and expect those will still be around. Those exist to stimulate this early adoption phase. So yes, historically, there's a lot of fleets that their fleet replacement plan is all done with capital expenditure. They buy these vehicles themselves. And we know, like we have 100 years of data, like we know what these vehicles cost now. And that is a bit of a science. As we get into this new technology, I think Aaron's talked about risk management, even contracts have to look different. There's a lot of interesting innovative financing models that have come about. And actually, there's a great report that CalSTART put out last year about taking commercial fleet electrification to scale. I've just popped that in the chat. The big one to mention is a lot of these new leasing models. I mean, 7Gen, the company that we co-founded, is, as you said, Teresa, very much motivated around mobilizing the money and the know-how. So it's been hard yards. Spending the last 2 years trying to find financing partners that will come to the table and actually back deals for charging infrastructure and vehicles has been really hard. They're all interested. They all have these ESG requirements, but once it gets down to actually assessing the risk variables and the unknowns, not everyone stays at the table. Some other pieces, these OEMs want to get their vehicles out on the roads. So there's some examples where they're willing to come to the table with some guarantees, or even groups that invest in them are willing to provide financing for projects because they have a vested interest in seeing these take place. Couple models just for people to think about. There is the classic capital lease structure. That's like an 8-10 year typical term. A new and emerging one is this idea of an operating lease. So this is where the financier is willing to take on some of the risk. Often those will get structured in line with the battery warranty terms. Again, sharing the risk model. One that hasn't been widely deployed, but is happening, is this concept of financing just a portion of the technology. So the battery portion, or discrete financing for that. Why? That's the bulk of the cost difference between an internal combustion engine vehicle and an EV. So if we can remove that variable, have someone saying, listen, I'll take on the CapEx for that portion over 12 years of the useful life of the battery. It helps with that business case question you put to Aaron. The like for like looks a little different. Proterra is trying that, for example, a major bus operator, and that's helping them get deployment. And then the last one are these as a service models. So either just the charging as a service or the charger and the vehicle, which is primarily what our company does. And there you're not only getting the financing, like you pay for it, Teresa, your question, but you're also then buying in some of the expertise and capability to help with that long process we talked about. But yeah, read the long paper I shared in the chat.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, exactly. And we need a lot of business model expertise at the table for this. So thank you. Thank you for pointing that out, Shayna. So we're wrapping up. We're going to move to Q&A. I'm just going to bring all the panelists onto the screen here. And just going to ask you to start off with or help us close off with just in a nutshell, what's the one thing people should do after today's webinar? So Aaron, can I start with you?
You sure can. Thanks, Teresa. I mean, from an initial stage standpoint, you need to determine, is electric currently for you? So, you know, analysis of daily kilometers per day. Are you domiciled? Do you have a certain percentage of sleepers that would not necessarily qualify from a published mileage standpoint? On road or in-house infrastructure charging, that's likely the biggest factor right now. Are you willing to invest the capital to kind of control your own destiny until scope widens and we can utilize on road to go farther and farther? And Charlotte covered it perfectly. I mean, we're going to need software not only for the end game all electric, but I will emphasize we're also going to need a solution for the midterm. So where we are mixed diesel, mixed electric, which tractor goes out to do which run based on either charge point, et cetera. So it's going to be exciting. I can't wait.
Okay, great. Charlotte?
I think I would echo what Aaron said. And chances are you're going to have vehicles in your fleet today that if they're not electrifiable now, they're going to be electrifiable within the next like very short term. So start, and that's about the easy win. So there's likely, if you have a mixed fleet, maybe it's just about your passenger vehicles within your fleet, or maybe you have some that domicile based that don't go very far. But I guess the advice is don't wait for the vehicle to be there and ready to buy before you start those conversations, because as we've heard today, like there's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of people, both within your company, but also externally, who are there and ready. There's experience out there, even if you don't have it in-house. So just start those conversations now.
Great. Mike, what's your word?
I mean, open-minded and flexible. I mean, I think that this is a transformation, and we use that word too coyly or too softly. I mean, this is a big deal, and it's going to be a transformation, but it's not all about the risk and the problems. It's all about it's also about the opportunities and the benefits. You know, recently, just a quick example, these trucks have no exhaust. So actually operating them in and through a warehouse for loading without exhaust in there, and the benefits of removing exhaust systems out of some of those warehouses. I mean, those are big real costs that just end up getting thrown in the cost of trucking, right? They become this indirect overhead cost that we think is just part of the business. And I guess what I'm saying is, you know, even in this case, financial people and other folks be open to this being different, and it'll save you some money here, or cost you some money here. Just be open-minded and flexible and keep that in mind.
Thanks, Mike. Shayna?
Yeah, all of this, ditto. The one I'd add is figure out where to start for you and pick some partners. Even when I'm at tables with seasoned veterans that have been at this for 20 years, they will say, we're still learning, aren't we? So don't do it alone. Get smart people at the table and figure out where to start.
I'm going to add something very tangible, which is get the single line diagrams for each of your sites. There's nothing that stops you. Just find out how much electrical capacity do you have at your site today. And then you can easily back calculate how much charging capacity you can deliver. And then if you know, like, okay, you're gonna know your caps immediately, right? So there's no guessing on that. And then you can know, okay, if I want to add X megawatt, then I'm gonna need like 3 years with my, or whatever, right? So just get the single line diagram and then you'll back calculate. Okay, great. Mike, I'm gonna bring you back. Do you want to moderate some questions from the chat? I saw some great questions in the chat.
Sure, and I don't think we'll be able to get to them all. We've only got 4 minutes left, but what I'm going to encourage people to do, if we don't get to them all, I will put my email in the chat. You can email the questions to me, and then I can flip them along to the panelists who can hopefully get back to you if we don't have time to get to them in the chat. The first one that came along, and it's for Aaron. What charging infrastructure is Walmart using?
Some things are still NDA. I will say the work we're doing right now is the feeder to the charger. So Teresa kind of, you know, we did the single line analysis. We know what the building capability are. So we are doing the prep, I'm going to say underground agnostically to accommodate any OEM's charger at this point, but we are not We have not put a charger on top of the ground at this point. It's all underground and upstream right now.
Okay. Thank you. Another question came from a company that provides aftermarket warranties to owner operators, smaller fleets, you know, extended warranty beyond what the manufacturer offers. And this may be kind of an email offline question unless somebody can handle it. But basically they're saying that they're having customers that are looking at purchasing electric trucks, and they're wondering who they speak to about offering aftermarket warranty programs for electric vehicles. Is there anybody on here that would have an answer to that? No? Okay. And I'm really not sure either. So your best might be to go to the manufacturers of them themselves, since they're new, and talk to them and see what you can work with.
Mike, if I could just make a little plug there. This is part of the challenge in Canada. Like, until we have regions and a number of fleets in a given region investing in EV trucks, we're not building the service support and after maintenance. It's chicken and egg thing. So, you know, solve for you and nudge your neighbor. Like, we should do this. We should all do this. And that's going to help raise the game. And then there'll be more people to answer that question.
For sure. One question we had in here, and this will probably be the last one we'll have a chance to get to. And it's kind of a theme on a few questions. They're asking, is there any options for charging the battery other than plugging in, such as solar? And the reason they ask that is, you know, what if you're in a desert, there's no charging infrastructure? I personally have had people ask me, you know, what happens if I get stuck in a traffic jam that lasts 14 hours? Like, and how is my battery going to stay charged? So there is some concern from people as to, you know, is there other alternatives to getting it charged or saving a charge other than plugging in?
Maybe Mike, you can take a crack at what you're seeing in the US on that one.
Well, I think, you know, there's a lot of what ifs and dreaming and thinking, or, you know, future planning, but definitely, you know, the resilience of this charging is really important. So battery storage, solar is part of the plans of a number of companies as they just put the charging in the grid in. And of course, you know, we all don't want to have too much battery around, but, you know, working on making sure you size the battery with enough cushion in there for some of those events that you're bringing up, Mike. So it's not a real good answer to the question, but some thoughts.
No, and I appreciate it. You know, as I think a lot of people said, you know, we're not at the end of this. We're still really right at the beginning. So a lot of stuff is still being looked. We're not at the very beginning, but it's still in its infancy, I guess, right? Some of these challenges and issues that people are looking at. So wanted to pass along. I did get a text message from some people attending this, and said this is one of the best panels they've ever attended, and the information was great. So little plug for everybody on this call. So the great job by everybody here. I thank you for taking time out of your day to pass this information along. I have put my email in the chat, and you also would have got it if you registered today. So if you did ask a question that we didn't get to, feel free to email it to me, and I'll pass it along to the panelists who may be able to get back to you with an answer for that. So again, thanks to our sponsors, Peterbilt, Trucking Human Resources Sector Council Atlantic. Thanks to all of our panelists. Great job, very informative panel, lots of great information. And last and not least, thanks for everybody for taking time out of your day to attend this webinar and show your interest in the topic that we had today. So with that, I'll bid everybody farewell. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Mike.
Mhm.